Hello and welcome to Blockchain Gaming World, episode 112. I am your host, John Jordan, and joining me today is Simon Davis, the CEO of Mighty Bear Games. How's it going, Simon?
It's good. Yeah, it's a really exciting time for us. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, that's why we have you on. So plenty to talk about. You've just announced your first blockchain games, Mighty Action Heroes. You've announced $10 million token investment to fund that, and some sort of the roadmap as well. But before we get into all the juicy stuff with what you're up to, should we find out a bit more about Simon Davis and what you've been doing in games and how you end up being the CEO of a company making Web3 games, I guess we might call them.
Yeah, sure. Happy to share more. So it's been a very interesting journey. I'd say like most games industry CEOs, my education didn't prepare me whatsoever for the job. So I come from a music background. I have a music degree. I'm very proud of my first class honors in professional musicianship, which has proved to be very useful in my day to day. So I was a working musician in Brighton many years ago, and as for those of you who are not based in Europe, you know that. You won't know that in Europe, basically people just disappear for the summer. And so one summer, a lot of my guitar students were absent, and I had kind of a shortfall in my finances. And so I'm lucky enough to come from a bilingual family, and I applied for a job doing localization at a local outsourcing studio.
Babel Studios, was it?
Babel, yeah, I went to Babel Media.
Studios.
Yeah, lots of people came out there actually. It's quite interesting. So yeah, I got a job. I ended up actually in QA instead of localization, but that was meant to be like a 6-week summer job, and I've been making games now for 18 years. I've done everything from QA obviously and localization to composing music for games to design, product management. I was one of the first people to do kind of big MMO free-to-play games in Europe. So I was at a company called BigPoint in Germany in the late 2000s. I was in charge of a browser game called Dark Orbit. I came from the console universe, just assuming that I was going to teach these noobs how to make real games and then we'd all make money. And it turns out free-to-play was much harder than I thought. And there was a lot more to it than just making a great game. And so that was a really eye-opening experience. And off the back of that, I ended up in Singapore, working at Ubisoft on the Ghost Recon franchise, on Ghost Recon Online and Ghost Recon Phantoms, primarily on the design and monetization side as I guess you'd call it a product lead in mobile. And then I went to work at King, and King had a studio here in Singapore called Nonstop Games, which is also I guess quite a notable studio because the guys from Play Ventures came, Henrik basically, that was his studio before he founded Play. And so when Nonstop stopped, a bunch of us decided to leave and start Mighty Bear, and so the first 8-9 employees from Mighty Bear all came from that studio. And so it was great, we had 9 kind of world-class developers all available at the same time in the same place, and it was kind of a no-brainer for me to start the studio. And so I became CEO by dint of the fact that no one else wanted the job, because it's
a good reason.
Yeah, it's the best job and the worst job a lot of the time, right? Best because you have complete freedom in how you run your day-to-day and the studio and everything else, and on the other hand, everything is your fault as CEO, and so it's an interesting position to be in. We were founded in early 2017, and so since 2018, so in the last 4 years, we've shipped 5 games. So we're pretty prolific. I'd say the 2 most notable games, one is called Battle Royale, which was a game we released on Apple Arcade. It did pretty well for us. For those of you who haven't played it, it's a Battle Royale game, but we replaced all the weapons with food. So we call it the world's biggest food fight, and so you hit people with baguettes. There's like a tsunami of butter coming in and a sausage cannon, and it's really fun. I really like the IP. I'm very proud of the world building the team did, and it's no secret that we're thinking about other ways to kind of expand that universe. And then last Christmas we worked with Disney and Apple on a game called Disney Melee Mania that came out also on Apple Arcade. It was more like a MOBA. Working with the teams at Pixar and Disney Studios was fantastic, and it was great vindication of where the team is. And today, the studio is just shy of 60 people, 60. So I think we've got 57 or 58 last time I looked, spread across 9 different countries, and so it's a very different beast. Being based in Southeast Asia, it's been very clear to us for some time where the industry's going. I think slightly unusual, like many of the people on the founding team actually had bought crypto back in 2015, 2016. So a bunch of us were on there. Like Abel, our product lead, was playing CryptoKitties. I didn't really get it at the time, but then like we looked at it and was like, okay, there could be something to this blockchain gaming, as it was called. And so Mighty Action Heroes in many ways is kind of a concept and a kind of model and a design that we've been kind of jamming on for about 4 years. If you take that and you combine it with the games that we released with Apple Arcade and the kind of expertise the studio built up in accessible multiplayer, then for me it was a no-brainer. And so late last year we decided that the whole studio was going to reorient itself to focus exclusively on Web3, because I see this as a once-in-a-decade platform shift, and the studios that win at these platform shifts really tend to dominate the industry for years to come. And they tend to be small, nimble studios like our own that can execute at a high level. So mobile gaming, I guess the classic example is Supercell, and Facebook gaming, it might be Zynga. Like, the studios that are there and kind of seize the opportunity. And so for us, like, this is a kind of moment that comes around like once in a decade.
Cool. Well, I entirely agree with all of that, and I love the idea of. Were you not tempted when Non-Stop stopped to have a riff on naming your studio, something around momentum or inertia?
We did. We wanted to honestly, like the whole Mighty Bear thing came. It was quite corporate. We did this whole exercise of something that was cute and accessible, but still conveyed a sense of scale. But yeah.
Is it worth people looking at your website and all the founding teams are all your little bears? It's very PFP ahead of.
Yeah, we were. It's a good point. Yeah, we were doing that in 2016. Yeah.
Cool. Anyway, so let's dig a bit more into Mighty Action Hero. So I guess I'm sure you've done many times the elevator pitch. What's the elevator pitch? Why are we interested in the Mighty Action Heroes? What are they? Why are they mighty?
It's a great question. So the game itself draws upon like classic action movies, which is a theme very dear to my heart. And so it's inspired by Hollywood, Bollywood, Hong Kong cinema, and even like Latin American cinema. So there's like no way to really say this nicely, but like a crap superhero called Mirage Man, who I think is Chilean, who takes the bus. And we thought it was just a really fun theme to kind of mash up these superheroes and have like a big battle royale game that leads into a lot of pop culture tropes. I think from the blockchain perspective, we're trying out some things which I think are quite innovative. So I think first thing is we worked with a lot of guilds actually on the economy design. So we didn't just come up with it in-house. Okay. And we had a guy called Michael Arnold join us fairly recently who was ex-YGG, and he was also part of the My Crypto Heroes team. And so he came with those learnings. And so we wanted to create an economy that's very rich and very deep and provides kind of specialization for different players within a kind of social setting, almost like you would in an MMO. So the core gameplay is actually very accessible, but underneath the hood actually there's a lot happening. So it's a really interesting design challenge, and it's also a way to try and tackle some of the inflationary mechanics that you see occurring in a lot of kind of Web3 games today, right? I mean, you see, I'm not here to diss anyone, but you see a lot of crypto native teams making games, and so they haven't been through the nightmares that we've been through on free to play, and seeing how those economies can blow up, right? And so there's a lot of I'd say fairly standard things that these games tend to be missing. And so I think that in combination with Michael's experience and the experience of some of the people we're working with is quite interesting.
Yeah, I think definitely we've seen this shift for a while where, obviously the first wave of games, even the second wave of games, came from people who were really into crypto, and that was sort of the lens through which they saw things, and they probably, as a team, had never made a game like a traditional game before. Maybe some people in the team had, but that was the joy for them. The enthusiasm was like, we're doing blockchain games, and it's the blockchain bit you could say the cart before the horse, or whatever you want to say, but that was the bit that was really interesting to them, and that clearly came out in the design. And I think now, over the last year, we've seen, you guys would be a sort of a great example of a team that has shipped a whole bunch of free to play and sort of premium mobile games at a high standard, and now we know you're going to make a decent game, because we can just see you've done that, and now you're going to the interesting bit is how you're going to sprinkle the blockchain over it, how you're going to integrate that and sort of have this synergy between, an exciting game. Everyone moans about blockchain games aren't fun. Clearly, I think your game is going to be fun, and then you're going to have this sort of ownership model and collecting and all that sort of stuff. I mean, that's the interesting bit, which is why I sort of wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I think there's a part that we don't talk about enough as well, which is the secondary market revenues. So theoretically, and this is something we're jamming on, and we haven't quite figured out exactly how it will work, but as a developer, you don't actually need to do primary sales. Like, so in free to play, every 6 to 8 weeks, you're pumping out new content. Maybe you're trying to improve conversion, you're trying to increase the LTV from whales or whatever. But like, as a designer, you have this dynamic where every 6 to 8 weeks you're challenged with extracting more value from your players. And for community, that doesn't feel great. Designers don't like it. Like, it's not really good for anyone. And so one of the things I pointed out to our team early on is actually on Web3, you could not sell any primaries. You could give them all out as rewards and prizes based on like leaderboard participation. And then that aligns the studio's incentives more with the players, whereby you're designing for long-term engagement and player-to-player kind of marketplace activity and trading and players interacting with each other. And that's a really interesting dynamic and change that I don't think gets talked about enough when people talk about NFTs and blockchain gaming and how the economies work.
And I think, yes, you're right, absolutely right. I mean, I'm a big fan of thinking about secondary market revenues as your primary revenue. I guess that there's two reasons why people don't like that. One is, up to this point, people have had to raise money by doing, token and NFT sales ahead of time to make the money to make the game. I mean, to a degree, you've done a token sale, although that's sort of a VC funding thing, so slightly different. The other thing is, I guess, secondary market revenues are, if the game works well, is they take a long time to come through. So it's very much like a long tail sort of revenue, which is very profitable. But equally, I guess you have that in between period where you've raised your funding, however you've done that, and then in 5-10 years time you're going to get all this money from this trading. But then there's a bit in the middle where maybe you're a bit light on revenue because obviously people don't like to have that in their business model.
I mean, that's definitely true, and I think we are in a fairly unique position that the studio has been running for a number of years, and it's like fairly comfortable, and there are things that we can do and we can wait things out, and we're also talking about things that you could sell by primary revenues that don't impact gameplay, like pure cosmetic items or other kind of vanity stuff. Like, there are ways that you could keep the tap running, but I think long term, I think the secondary model is actually far more conducive to having a great relationship with your community, and communities are what Web3 is all about, right?
Exactly. But then I guess the other thing is, if you're you need to sort of bake in trading into fundamentally into your sort of economy and your meta progression. So people aren't going to just go, right, I'm going to buy the top NFT and then I don't need to buy any more because I've got the best one. So how are you thinking about that? How are you baking that sort of ability to I guess collect lots of things and then have lots of sort of gear around them that you may be swapping in and out or leveling up?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things you can do. So like, I know it's not a popular example with a lot of gamers, but it's a game that I'm a huge fan of, which is FIFA Ultimate Team. Like, they do a lot of things around like live ops and seasons that have different entry requirements. And so that generates a lot of trading naturally within the ecosystem. So the one that always comes around every year, right? If it's in February or late January, you start loading up on Irish players because St. Patrick's Day is coming around in March. And so you're going to need them for the event. So like, that's just like a stupid example, but like there's a lot of stuff you can do around that, and like having entry requirements for live ops that have different characteristics. You can change the meta and different entry requirements from season to season, like something that Hearthstone does, right? Where they're like, okay, this season, these are the cards we're using in ranked gameplay. But in unranked, these are fine. Or maybe the cards that are not allowed in ranked are allowed for special story modes, for example, or like PvE challenges. And so like if you think about it in the right way, like you can find ways to keep creating use and value for a whole spread of stuff, but you do need to have a lot of different content. That's true, and you need to find a way to generate it, and this is something you have to be thinking about from the outset. It can't be something that you just like you slap on, almost like I won't name names, but I was speaking to what we would politely call a legacy publisher recently, and so that one of their big strategies is now to take the existing portfolio and add NFTs. And it's like, that's Web 2.5. Like that's basically a great way to alienate your existing players, not bringing in any Web3 folk either. So yeah, that's basically the other way, the thing you want to avoid.
And something we have mentioned, and again, something I suppose that has been really missing from blockchain games up to this point, because it's a very sort of specialized skill, is live ops, live operations. And we talk about that a lot in the free-to-play sort of mobile and the sort of free-to-play kind of, I guess a big point you have been massive into live ops. So can you, for people who aren't so sort of au fait with it, can you give a little sort of explanation of what live ops is and why it's so important to sort of keep community engaged in? Because it's not changing the gameplay, but it's changing sort of the metas.
Oh yeah, it's a regular cadence of events, and so there could be special events where you have a PvE event and you have to squad up with 5 or 6 other players to take down a boss. Just as a quick diversion, like in our game, all the bad guys have the trait that their favorite food is Hawaiian pizza. So it could be a robot that's trying to make everyone eat Hawaiian pizza, or it could be like a special weekend tournament, or it could be an event whereby if you do a specific activity this weekend, you get a special material that you can use for crafting. It's basically the things that MMORPGs and free-to-play games have been doing for years to keep people playing. And with live events, you basically have that scarcity where this is only running for a fixed amount of time, so I need to maximize my kind of value within this time period. And maybe I'm not going to play Tuesday to Friday, but on the weekend, like, there's always going to be something fresh to check out.
Yeah. And I guess the interesting thing for some of the big free-to-play mobile games is now, their live ops teams are bigger than their original development teams in some cases. I mean, that's really for free-to-play mobile. The industry has evolved that sort of live ops is the thing that makes it work. The game is sort of like almost like abstract, really. it's the live ops, particularly. I mean, certainly where you are in sort of Southeast Asia. All those big Chinese games. It's live ops is what makes them the money.
Yeah, I mean, but even if, like, going back to King, right? Even if you look at Candy Crush is consistently one of the top grossing products in the world, and that's live ops these days. You have people who have been playing Candy Crush for what, like, I think it came out 2012, 2013, but
that's right,
about 10 years.
Yeah.
And they're still putting money into it every week or every month because there's a fresh cadence of events and like time limited content to check out. And so, do you go to the expense and risk of developing a new game from scratch and then hoping you can market it and build up a user base? Or do you basically try and optimize and keep your existing user base engaged as much as possible? It's a no-brainer for a big company.
And it was interesting actually that King did go through that period of doing all those saga games where they thought like, we're not doing a sequel, but we do like a sister type game, and obviously those didn't really. I mean, some of them were sort of okay, but they realised over time you just put all your resources into the one big one, which is actually sort of like in some ways without being someone with a hammer looking for a nail everywhere. That's sort of very sort of Web3, isn't it? I mean, Web3 is people are really committed to an experience emotionally, not with owned sort of items in the game like they would do, but that's what people want, and everything else around that is sort of superfluous, and just give them more of what they're already doing, and that's sort of what Web3 is doing at the next level, isn't it? Where you can imagine those people who played Candy Crush, first players of Candy Crush day one, 10 years ago, and they have some assets there, and they may not be worth tons of money, but they would have the status of having those sort of things and having them outside of the game potentially as well. Is the concept is still, I think, incredibly strong, and it's still sort of misunderstood by a lot of people in the games industry.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great flex, and I could see my mother paying for or being very proud of her OG Candy Crush role, and her profile picture badge or whatever. Yeah, I could see that.
Cool. We'll get into a bit more detail of exactly what's going on with Mighty Action Heroes, but Mighty Action Heroes is sort of, I guess, the first incarnation of what you're calling Mighty Net. I see you've avoided the Mighty Verse there. Very, very good. Can you talk a little bit about I don't know how much you want to go into sort of future plans because you've just announced sort of current plans, but a bit about Mighty Net, because there is, you have a token which is in Mighty Action Heroes that will underpin a whole bunch of stuff, and you have spoken in the white paper or the light paper about a few sort of ideas you've got there. So can you maybe flesh that out?
Yeah, I mean, for us, like, the way that we look at this is we're not just building a game, and so that was something that was very important to communicate when we were doing the discussions for the token sale. Essentially, the plan is to build an ecosystem of multiple games which are interlinked. So, look, the first game being a battle royale game just is a no-brainer for us because we're a studio that's got a great track record in that. The team knows the genre inside out. We know we can ship quickly and ship something that's kind of, without being too big-headed, like, the top kind of standard. And then after that, like, look, we shipped an arena brawler, and so like that we would take the existing learnings and tech that we'd built for Mighty Action Heroes, and all of a sudden there's arena brawler within the same ecosystem, and the assets are transferable between them. They use the same token to govern them, so the value is accruing from multiple games to the same token. And after that, it could be like a MOBA. It's a teamfight tactics game that we've had a divulging secrets, but like we've had an internal design for a long time, and I'd really love to make. And anyone that knows me knows that I'm a complete strategy bore. Someone who spends thousands of hours playing Civ or Advanced Wars or any of these kind of turn-based games, and so We're looking at ways that we can create other games within the same ecosystem where it actually makes sense for the assets to be truly interoperable. This is something that people talk about, but like, and you always get these stupid examples like, well, I can't use my sword in a racing game. So, of course not. That makes no sense. But like, if you have a hero, an action hero, and use him in a MOBA, and you use the same guy in a battle royale game, and then maybe in like a turn-based strategy game or a MOBA, like those things will actually make perfect logical sense, and the universe is consistent and interlinked, and so that's something we're looking to do. And so, right now, with the studio is pretty much like solely focused on Mighty Action Heroes because it's our first shot on goal in this space, and we need to make sure that everyone's focus is in the right spot. But by the end of this year, because the game, is likely going to have the first kind of early access or test version before the end of the year. Towards the end of this year, we will start work on subsequent games, and so my goal is to have multiple titles live within the Mighty Network in the next couple of years.
Pretty ambitious. I guess one sort of let's say issue there is obviously you've sort of come up with a this theme, this sort of I don't know, it's B movie, but sort of fun mashup cinema action movies, and that's sort of well reflected in the sort of the characters of Mighty Action Heroes. But at some point, if you were coming up from scratch with a MOBA, I guess is there a bit of a disconnect there that you have to sort of have these characters because they're the ones you had from that previous game, and over time that might feel like a little bit more of a stretch, or are you really happy with your sort of art theme conception that is going to be very sort of flexible?
I think that when you have a theme, and if you look specifically at the characters in Mighty Action Heroes, they look like art toys. I think when you have that figurine kind of aesthetic, I think you can actually play with other themes. So there's nothing to stop like season 2 or 3 of Mighty Action Heroes being like sci-fi or fantasy heroes or whatever. So no, I don't worry about that too much. I think one thing that will consistently always be the case for us is that the themes are generally pretty lighthearted because as a studio we focus on accessibility and kind of our games in it, like they have combat but they're never violent, like it's like cartoon violence, right? And so it has to really fit that kind of thing. I don't think you'll ever see like, I don't know, I'm just picking an example, but like a super hardcore dark graphic novel styling with people like decapitating each other in any of our games at any point. But if it could appear on like Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network and it wouldn't be out of place, then it's likely that we would probably explore a theme along those lines.
And I saw you sort of quoted as saying, I don't want to have 10,000 players. I want sort of 10 million players. So obviously that's the sort of the big vision. So how does that sort of play into? Obviously you're a mobile studio. I assume this is a mobile game, or there's obviously issues around doing a Web3 game on app stores, which are not the same as just doing something through Apple Arcade, certainly. So do you see that as sort of a bit of a work in progress and something that the industry will sort of come to Web3, or do you have some sort of master plan to do that, or how do you think about that sort of nuts and bolts stuff?
If I had a master plan, I probably wouldn't share it right now. But at a very high level, like I would say that look, the first version of the game is going to be on browser purely because browser for me is like, along with mobile, the platform that has the lowest barrier to entry, and obviously with browser you don't have to worry about distribution on proprietary stores and a 30% cut. But having said that, the mobile version will follow up, I think, quite quickly after the first first browser version is launched. I think the challenge for us is like, how do we develop a mobile version which sits within the existing guidelines? And so we have some ideas around that, which I can't really go into too deeply, but I think mobile and browser will be the kind of first platforms, and the mobile version will have, will make concessions to its native platform. But I think long term, I would be very surprised if the main hardware manufacturers don't have like Web3 functionality at OS level within the next few years, to be honest. And I do think there will be an element of convergence. I'm also, optimistic about people like Epic, by their game store kind of opening doors and kind of broadening the pie and bringing new players into the space as well. So I don't worry too much. I think it's a case of things are going to develop in the right direction over the next couple of years.
Cool. And you've already sort of mentioned a little bit about sort of timings and stuff, but so where are we in terms of, at the moment you've just announced sort of yesterday, so very early on, but you got plans for sort of NFTs, and you got plans for sort of say early access this year. So can you go into a bit of detail on those
Yes.
things.
So there's a PFP collection that we'll be divulging more information about, I think, in the next week or two. And they'll be on sale with actually pretty soon. So yeah, we're working on it. It's inspired by the action movie theme as well, and by who we are. I think it's really cool. Like it's not strictly part of the Mighty Action Heroes universe, but holding those NFTs will give you benefits when Mighty Action Heroes launches and allow access to the early access and whatever else. Then Mighty Action Heroes will come out after that, at least the early access first version, and then kind of towards the end of the year we'll be defining the timelines for that a bit more explicitly and more publicly, and we will probably start thinking about announcing the next maybe 2 or 3 games at that point.
Really? So you really are on an accelerated program then?
We always are, man. Like Battle Royale was built in 6 months,
really?
and Melee Mania was done in 11. Yeah, we're nothing if not fast. It's not always easy, but yeah, we believe that, and this is like a cliche, right? But the speed is a huge advantage. And the shipping is an art, and you have to keep shipping year in, year out. Like we're never going to be a studio that spends 2-3 years on a game before anyone sees it. It's just not who we are.
Good. And on that note of brevity, I guess we'll say excellent. You covered a lot of stuff there in a very succinct manner. So.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much. Cool.
Thank you.
So thanks, Simon. I guess we will put all the links in. I guess Discord is always the best place to keep up to date with what's going on with Mighty Action Heroes.
Yes.
Good.
Yes, it is. Yeah. So please feel free to follow us on Twitter and join the Discord.
Lovely. And thank you to Simon for his time, and thank you for watching or listening, however you have consumed the podcast. Don't forget, every week or so we are talking to the people who are building out this entire new system of gaming. It's really sort of exciting. It's really messy. It goes sentiment goes up and down, but I think it's a fascinating new way to make better games, and games that are better enabled with the community and are more aligned in incentives. So thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and see you next time. Oh, forgot my thing. I always forget the thing.